Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, baby. It is pre-hump day, pre-turkey day. It's pre-humpy turkey. It's that day of the week. There you're going to go. We're going to figure it out. The last day of the week for a lot of us working folks here, the blue collar or white collar working folks. But, I know a lot of you got to work on Friday and everything, and I'm sorry, but it's Friday for me, so I'm feeling pretty good. Welcome to the program, and thanks for coming in and joining us. Broadcasting live around the world at michaeldukeshow.com, where you'll find the audio-only live stream and so much more. And, of course, broadcasting across the state on this, your favorite radio station and or translator. It is the Michael Dukes Show. Good morning. Packed show today. Today we are full. We're jam-packed. We're going to start off in just a second with Joe Geldhoff and Donna Arduin, who are both in the green room right now, hanging out, waiting for us. We're about to dive into it with them. We're going to talk with them about the upcoming session and what the the whole next year is going to look like in their mind, and the post-election stuff. And it's going to be a thorough rundown of everything that they can see out there. And in hour two, we're going to do something similar with candidate Nick Begich, who's going to be joining us and giving us a post-election AAR, after action review, right? Or a debrief on what's going on. And we'll be talking with Nick Begich in hour two on the broadcast this morning. First and foremost, let me say thank you to the friends over there at Satellite West, who are, of course, sponsoring the program this morning. They, as always, have been kind enough to provide us with sponsorship. Satellite West, doesn't matter if you're at Anaktuvik or Bethel or Metlakatla or Menchumina or all the way down to Uzinki, wherever it is that you are in the state, they can keep you connected anywhere in the world. Whether it's text messages or checking your email or surfing the internet or just making a phone call, Satellite West are the people that you want to talk to. SatelliteWest.com is where you'll find them on the internet. And of course, they are the experts on that. So make sure that you go out there and say thank you for sponsoring the program this morning. All right, well, let's get things ready and dive into it. We've got Joe Geldhoff joining us this morning, and Donna Arduin, she's traveling, so we won't get any pictures of her, but we will get the audio from her, and they both join us this morning to discuss things. And so as soon as let's start off with Joe, and as Donna will unmute herself, and we'll be good to go here. We've got them both on the program. Good morning, Joe. How are you?
Well, good morning, Michael. Good morning, Donna. I'm fine. Thanks, from Juneau, Alaska. Well,
appreciate you coming on board, and hopefully everybody's ready for the Turkey Day stuff, and we'll be all good.
I know. I've said I know Donna's ready for Thanksgiving because traditionally the Detroit Lions play on there, and she and I have a shared Michigan background from way in the back. And
oh wow,
so it's a day to have Thanksgiving and watch the Lions lose typically.
Okay, let's not jinx it quite yet, but yeah, it'll be fine. Donna is I see she's here, but she's accidentally muted herself. Donna, if you want to unmute yourself, and then we'll say hi to you as well. Donna Arduin should be joining us here in just a second as she says that, as she unmutes herself on that. Joe, let's start off with you as we wait for Donna here. We're going to we want to kind of go over everything that's happening in this last few weeks of the election, kind of the disappointment in not seeing what's going on. With the choices that were made, with the whole ballot measure, with with the upcoming session. Give me some of your surface level thoughts here as we take a look at this, and we'll get started.
Well, I think one of the big issues here was how will our Alaska electorate turn out in the ranked choice voting format? And it appears that there was slightly less participation, and part of that's because it wasn't a presidential election year. But ranked choice voting, according to the proponents of ranked choice voting, was supposed to moderate the election of officials. That is, both the super liberals and the people who are maybe on the far right wing were supposed to disappear, and that seems to have happened in many cases. So, just looking at the state house races. The races I most closely followed were up in Fairbanks. The race with Scott Kawasaki. A lot of us thought he was going to be really challenged and not return. He, in fact, ran a pretty good campaign. I particularly like Scott Kawasaki because he's a huge proponent of the permanent fund dividend. But Kawasaki won. That was a bellwether race, at least in my opinion. The other races that were interesting to me were whether or not Kelly Merrick would make the jump from the state house into the Alaska Senate. She did, and that was inconsistent with the Republican Party. And I'll disclose, I am a registered Republican and have been for a long time. Kelly Merrick was not the darling of the Republican Party. She made it. Interesting enough, Mike Shower, a good conservative in my estimation, and somebody who's a permanent fund dividend proponent, Mike Shower was savaged by some of the Republican establishment and made it. Bert Stedman down here in Juneau is not the darling of the Republican establishment. Is perceived as a rhino, I guess. But Bert Stedman came in with 69% of the vote. And the big question down in Southeast was, who were the 31% of the people who voted against Uncle Bert? Some other interesting races would Matt Clayman make the jump from the House, Democrat, into the Senate and beat Mia Costello? He did. I could natter on here, but what's really interesting is a lot of old time dogs, including me, who have been observing the legislature for 20, 30, 40 years, believe that the Senate will be constituted according to a coalition. Odds are Gary Stevens, a moderate Republican, will be the presiding officer, and there'll be an allocation of chairmanships, chairs for R's and D's, and you'll probably end up 13 people, including Democrats and Republicans, in the Senate. Still too hard to say what'll happen in the House, but it's possible there'll be another coalition. So what does that mean going forward? A lot of people on the far right are very disappointed. They're yipping and yapping about, these are all a bunch of rhinos, and we need to turf them out. Well, they didn't get turfed out, and there's probably going to be a coalition. Mike Dunleavy won actually fairly handily in the ranked choice voting, and that tells me Mike Dunleavy has learned a lot in 4 years. He was a credible campaigner. He had as a messenger, Mike Dunleavy did much better than a lot of people thought. He had an okay message, and he had adequate money, and Mike Dunleavy is going to win in the first round of the voting, which is going to take place later today. So,
right. Well, I think I want to come back to the comment about ranked choice voting, how it was supposed to eliminate the left and the right, the far left and the far right, because what it seems to have done is only accomplish, from what I see, about half of that. But we'll talk about that. Donna Arduin is with us right now. Good morning, Donna. How are you doing?
Good morning.
Thanks for coming on board. Appreciate you being part of it with us this morning. I know you're traveling, and I know that's difficult. Hopefully you're over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house. Are you headed for Thanksgiving travel?
Yes, we are, but I pulled over actually, so hopefully I won't have too much background noise.
Oh, okay. No, you sound great. You sound great. I appreciate you coming on board. So, Donna, your thoughts here as you look at the kind of the post-election recap and everything else. What do you see? What are your thoughts on what took place on Election Day, and what we're predicting right now for the upcoming session?
You're talking about for Alaska?
Yeah, for Alaska specifically. Yeah.
Well, I didn't hear what Joe said, but I'm sure it was much more intuitive than what I might think looking from here in Michigan. It's a strange day to be doing this because I believe you're going to have results today, maybe tonight.
Yes, 4 p.m. today. They're supposed to be doing the tabulation, apparently live in a live press conference. They're going to run the computer program that's going to do all the ranking after the fact.
Well, I listened to Kathy Tilton on your show last week, and I was very encouraged by her optimism. And I have heard Senator Shelley Hughes talk about trying to get a Republican coalition or Republican majority together, but I don't have any insight into either of those things.
What are you, as you look at the makeup though of some of the new people, from a budgetary standpoint, do you think this is going to be good for the state of Alaska budget, or is this going to be more difficult?
Well, I think the only thing that would be good is if you had solid majorities. When I say that, it's the Duke's definition of conservative, right?
Right.
In both houses, which clearly isn't going to happen. So I think the more interesting thing is kind of interesting for me, just easy for me to say sitting from here, but is to see if the governor will work with Republican majority if there's one in one house as opposed to the other, because it might put him in an interesting position.
Right. Joe, let's go back to you for a second here. Again, I just kind of the same question that I just asked Donna about kind of the forward fiscal situation. I mean, here we are. We're, continuing to spend ever increasing amounts of money. We continue to have, we had a little bit of a spike there with the Ukraine-Russia dust up that, caused the oil prices to spike. It gave us some more money. In fact, one of the comments from one of the outgoing senators, we got more money than we know what to do with, kind of thing. But here we are today, just a handful of months later, and we're going to be facing a deficit again. And with the makeup of the crew that's going in there, it doesn't seem like there's a real appetite to reduce the size and scope of government. What are your thoughts on that as we move forward?
Well, I think this upcoming session, first of all, everybody needs to understand politicians, they love spending money, and it's just way more fun to spend money than it is to save or to cut. And that's, I think a lot of people understand that. And when they come down to Juneau, and it would be the same if the Capitol was in Fairbanks, they got all these needs and they want to spend. And it's going to be really dicey and really delicate if there's a coalition in the Senate or the House or both of them. And I think we'll see. But the results are looking like there's going to be an opportunity for a coalition in both chambers. And that means the governor is going to have to be very judicious in working with the legislature and not being heavy-handed and not saying, I'm going to cut, $500 million, but he's got to come up with sensible targeted cuts this year and try to look for a real reduction of at least 5 to 6%. And then he's got to do that for the remaining 4 years of his term. That's how I see it. The governor went through that, big thing. And Donna Arduin was great in proposing, that was her job when she was up here working with the governor's office. Give me the smorgasbord of cuts. Then that was implemented, not by Donna Arduin, in my view, by some people who no longer are in the governor's office. And the governor realized he tried to go too far, too fast. So we're going to have a more measured approach. Now, does that make me a compromiser? Maybe so, but the art of the realistic is going to play out here in the next 6 to 8 months. And it likely means the governor's going to have to quietly cajole and even threaten and actually use the veto pen to come up with real reductions. And there's some real reductions. My Democratic friends are forever whining about, we've cut to the bone. Not true. I mean, in a long lunch, Michael, you could come up with $200 million of cuts.
Your Republican friends have done the same thing. I mean, that's the Bert Stedman line. We've cut to the bone. We couldn't possibly cut any further. I mean, that's not simply a Democratic thing. That's a business as usual Republican thing as well.
Right. But the reality down here, and there are things that need to be looked at carefully and then cut appropriately, including the Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority. We have all these slush funds floating around where they've spent billions and billions of dollars on favored projects. I mean, and the Democrats are always saying we need more money for foster care or this or that, their favorite charities, but the Republicans have their favorite charities. And we need rigorous analysis of what really yields good results for the public and not just, favored slush funds for this faction or that faction. But, Donna can, not even without talking about Alaska per se, this is a problem all over. Donna Arduin, somebody who's worked all over the nation and has seen the same phenomenon about how difficult it is to start unwinding government and adding real value to public expenditures. But Alaska can't keep going. We can't borrow our way into prosperity. We can't spend our way into prosperity. It's going to be a combination of cuts and thoughtful spending that deliver essential services without a lot of the goofball stuff that goes on down here.
Donna Arduin and Joe Geldhoff are our guests here on the Michael Duke Show. I want to get Donna's take on the budgetary situation as well. We'll get some details on that here in just a moment. But unfortunately, we are up against the commercial break, so we're going to take it, and we're going to come back. We will be back with more here in just a moment. It is the Michael Duke Show, broadcasting live across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station, and FM translators, and around the world at MichaelDukeShow.com. We continue with Joe Geldhoff and Donna Arduin in just a moment.
What is that?
Common sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we're in the commercial break right now with Donna Arduin and Joe Geldhoff, and we'll get Donna's hot take on this here in just a minute when we return to the radio. Let's make sure that Donna, you've been able to hear everything with Joe in the last round?
I have.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure that you're all good to go. Laura says, do you know, Michael, what time we can watch the results? My understanding is that they're going to do it at 4 p.m. today, and it will be on a live broadcast, so I'm sure that probably KTUU will carry it. They'll probably have it on the State of Alaska's Facebook page, maybe the governor's office Facebook page. We'll see if we can track that down, but that's my understanding, is that it'll be at 4 p.m. This afternoon, and they're going to do it live. They're going to push the button on the air live, so you can see all the tabulations come out and everything else. Joe, somebody asks, "What's on your hat?" They want to know what is the symbol on your hat. Somebody asked that.
I play from time to time on an ice hockey team down here in the rec league for the Winnipeg Rifles, and this is their badge. And I wear the Winnipeg Rifles badge. They were a unit of the Canadian Army that fought in, they were in Manitoba, South Africa. They were first ashore on the Normandy beaches. So we skate for the Winnipeg Rifles.
Okay. All right. Well, people, I'm just trying to answer questions in the chat room right now. As you guys were KTOO at 4 p.m. Thank you, Terry. That was right. It wasn't KTUU. KTOO gavel to gavel will have it at 4 p.m., which means you can go to ktoo.org and watch it there. The initial reactions that a lot of people felt, and Joe, I want to go back to what you were saying with, the intention of ranked choice voting was to try and pull the far right and the far left and just get kind of a more moderate stance. And while I feel my position is not that far right, I just want kind of more limited government and a smaller spend and a little more responsiveness. I feel like that all the candidates that would be that way pretty much got the axe. While on the other hand, all the pro-government candidates, the Democrats and the Kelly Merricks of the world who are pro-government spend, they seem to get the nod the whole time. So it seems like only half of the vision of this ranked choice voting thing came true, which was, It carved out all the smaller spend conservatives and let everybody else run amok on the playing field. What are your thoughts?
Well, I take your point on how you feel your candidates did, but politics comes down to, in my world, messenger, message, and money. And like we'll use Kelly Merrick. People don't like her message, or they perceive her as that, but she in fact is a pretty good messenger. Had, at least for that district, an adequate message and sufficient money. You flip to some of the other things, other races that were in play and everything. People think money's too big of a deal, and money matters, but you need all three. And the real problem with my party, the Republican Party here, is bad recruitment. And like, they anointed Kelly Chewbacca, who appealed to a base. They turned their back on Lisa Murkowski, but Kelly Chewbacca wasn't a particularly great messenger. Her message was always muddied, at least in Alaska. And yes, Lisa Murkowski had plenty of money, more money than Kelly Chewbacca, but she had sufficient money to get her message out.
Friends in high places, $7 million for Mitch McConnell's Senate Leadership Fund. I mean, that was really about the money and appealing to the moderate Democrats.
Right, but most of that money, Mitch could have, and the boys could have taken that money out on a pallet and burned, $6.8 million here. It was just wasted. I mean, it went right to the recycling bin for all the flyers and everything. And you still got to have a message that resonates, and you got to have a messenger who can articulate that. Now, I'll give you a perfect example of somebody who got smoked in the money department, but was a better messenger with a good message a couple of years ago, was Donald Trump. I mean, Hillary Clinton was a terrible messenger, lousy message, and she had gobs of money.
The ding means we got to return to the radio, so we're about to jump back into it. We're going to start with Donna's comments on the budget, and we'll see where we go from there. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Hello, fight's on. That means round one begins. So we're just going to duke it out here. Donna Arduin and Joe Geldhoff are our guests here on the program. We're talking about elections and fiscal situations. And I just talked to Joe about what his thoughts were on the upcoming session and the fiscal situation and what he thought needs to happen. Donna is the money lady. She's seen this. She's done this in different states. She's seen how hard it is to restrict the size and scope of government and provide the services and reduce the overhead overall. So, Donna, as you look at the makeup of what we have right now, and Joe's commentary on the governor's going to need to keep this downward pressure on, we already saw what happened back in 2018 with what I thought was pretty minor cuts in the long run. It was about 8-9%, and the hue and cry. What do you think is going to have to happen here? What are the governor's options as we go forward?
Well, I want to start with Joe's points, if I could, and talking about other governors and other legislatures in my experience. Yes, other legislatures like to spend, but I'll tell you what, I can't imagine any legislature outside of Alaska that wouldn't want to first give the largest PFD they could to their constituents. It's mind-boggling to me. So normally they like that even more. The second thing is other great governors around the country are holding the line on spending. They spend a lot less than Alaska does now, and they're not trying to spend more. Those governors and legislatures like making non-special interests more happy than special interests by having a low-cost environment and good opportunities for jobs and economic growth and families own economic growth. So those are a couple of things. And then the third one is when we talk about cuts, without getting too far into, behind the scenes, what we proposed for Governor Dunleavy wasn't to just cut things. It was policy reform. And all of my other governors have made the statement that policy should drive budgets and not the other way around. And so I'll say, to me, a huge mistake that we made was not having policy drive budgets. And there are plenty of great ideas in Juneau and around Alaska, and just borrowing from other states as how to fix your policies. And there are numerous opportunities. So I hate using the word cuts, because
Right.
you reform your policies and you're going to become more efficient, more effective. I know that sounds like cliche, but I'm going to tell you what, good policy and good budgeting go hand in hand, and you'll reduce your costs. And more importantly, you'll actually be getting something out of your government.
Right.
Spending more to not educate children, spending more not to have people graduate in 4 or 5 or 6 years into something that's going to give them a job from the university, spending money to keep people and corporations and not-for-profits dependent upon the state is not spending money that's going to help your economy. We've done the multiplier. It actually
Right.
it actually detracts from it.
Right. Well, and this is something that I think is very important, because, and I think the education example is a prime example of that. We heard the messaging during the election cycle that, oh, the BSA, we haven't raised it enough. We haven't done this. We haven't been spending money on education enough. We're falling behind. And so the answer is always more money, but there's no policy change to enact that or to make that money spend be more productive, and it's not making sure that it's getting down into the classrooms where it belongs, or changing the policies to change the way we teach so that the outcomes are better. We've continually heard we need more and more and more money for education, yet we continue to be at the bottom of the barrel. That's a prime example of that, don't you? Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And not only is that money not going, as you always say, it's for the kids. It's not for the kids. It's for the NEA sponsored bloated administrators, construction industry that's charging enormous prices and keeping school partially empty buildings alive or building new ones. And it's gotten worse than that. It's what's happening inside the classroom now, which is sort of a pernicious vine that's just choking out, the children, the character the parents give to their children before they leave for school.
Well, Donna, since you're the policy guru on this stuff, and again, you've done this in many states and worked with governors and legislatures who are willing to try and fix the problem, what policy changes should we be looking at here in the state of Alaska that you think this current crop of legislators is going to listen to? I mean, or what, again, maybe even not listen to? What would be your recommendations on policies that we should be changing here in the state to make it more efficient, and like you said, not to necessarily to use the word cuts, but to make it more efficient and make the money go farther?
So I was on Must Read Alaska Facebook with John Quick last week, and I said 2 answers to that. One was, you don't need to come up with new ideas. There's so many great ones around the country. And the book that we wrote with American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, on grading the governors, was really to help provide a roadmap to what states are doing right and what states are doing wrong. And just say, if you just change this, these things, you can get on the right track. The second one was just simply do everything Florida does.
Just do that's it. Just follow Florida's policies, and that will solve most of the issues that you're having in the state. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, Florida spends 1/4 of what Alaska spends on a per capita basis, and they have tremendous outcomes to their programs.
Joe, as you look at this, I know that you're not necessarily the money guy in this regard, but what are agreements with that? Any addendums? Any other policies that you think could change that would make things better?
Well, I could not agree more that policy should drive budgetary considerations. And just to put a little bit of flesh on those bare bones, look at the Department of Commerce and Economic Development. I mean, we have all these regulated industries. You want to cut somebody's fingernails or, put fingernail polish on, you got to have a license. You want to sell real estate, you got to have a license. You want to be a lawyer, you got to have a license, although they do that through the court system. There's all these regulatory regimes that are basically state enforced restrictions on entry to conducting business. And the argument is, well, it's just a little industry, it's just a little nip and a tuck here and everything. But cumulatively, those are a big drag on the economy. They destroy opportunity for people to enter into something where they might be really good.
Right.
And just because we do it in the modern day, I mean, we didn't have all these regulatory agencies,
Well,
100 years ago, and life goes on. And then you get into
occupational licensing is nothing more than a government scheme to create more money and to try to control the free market. That's the thing. It's a barrier to entry, especially to those in the lower income brackets who are trying to start something new, a side hustle, or trying to better themselves. It just creates stumbling blocks for entrepreneurship. Occupational licensing is a scam in many ways. Like you said, I'm not talking about people who are trying to do something super technical or something like that. Like you said, somebody who wants to cut hair or clip nails or do something like that. Some of those things are ridiculous.
Well, then you get into the big ticket items like the Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority, which, if you're in power, it's your favorite slush fund. But we have spent billions and billions of dollars in Alaska for very substandard returns. If, for example, there was just a recent report that came out on ADA doing a 40-year look back. And if we had just taken the money that has been largely squandered in the Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority and put it in the permanent fund, it would have had a much better rate of return. Permanent fund dividends would have been up. And the big defense is always, well, it creates jobs. But, throwing money at jobs is like throwing money at education. It's just waste of money in large part, and the opportunity costs that come with blowing money on substandard projects or inferior education is money you can never recoup. It doesn't add to your societal well-being, and it just favors a narrow slice of people. Those kind of policies, I really hope Governor Dunleavy will use the next 4 years to dig in and look on a policy-driven basis and find the efficiencies that are there,
Right.
and then implement them. Governor Dunleavy's his goals are not particularly bad. What he needs to do is sharpen up his implementation, and I would offer that with the greatest respect and well wishes. But he needs to pay attention to implementation more than just battering on about we need to cut.
Well, you've touched on one of my favorite hot topics, which, of course, is this idea that somehow government should be out there driving job creation. And of course, as you point out, all these boondoggles that ADIA and other state-run entities have put together, they're all short-term because they fail. And so those jobs are never permanent. Donna, your thoughts on the role of government in creating jobs in the free market? I mean, you've seen it. I just heard the laugh. You've seen this, of course, from state to state to state, and that's a favorite talking point for many politicians. Government is here to create those jobs. But we know that historically, any job created by government outside of the own government employment base is always temporary and never seems to last very long.
Oh, let's be clear. The only thing that government creates is dependency.
That pretty much sums it up. Go ahead.
The Department of Commerce should be called the Department of Anti-Commerce in Alaska. Those corporations, I 1,000% agree with Joe. Those corporations all squander money. They're off books. The legislature doesn't oversee them. And we could go on and on. If I was queen, they would be gone. And, as Joe said, the regulatory, I wouldn't even have a Department of Commerce doing those things. So just to be blunt, government, the only thing that government does is redistribute money. And if it can do so in a small way, like in Florida, then it can, in an efficient way, then it can get hands into parents who choose their children's education, for example.
Right.
We can go on and on, but creating dependency, as you both have said, just actually is a negative for your economy. And therefore, Alaska spends more than other states and it has the worst outcomes.
Donna Arduin and Joe Geldhoff are our guests. We're continuing our discussion on where we go from here. We're going to continue that here in just a hot second, but we've got to take a quick break, and we will continue in just a moment. Again, with Joe Geldhoff and Donna Arduin here. The Michael Duke Show coming up in hour 2. Nick Begich will be joining us for another recap of the elections and where he see things going from here. We will continue in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
We're in the break right now. Joe Geldhoff, Donna Arduin, our guests. And Joe, you were just talking about the governor, because this is really going to be, this next session, in my opinion, is really going to be the governor having to square off against the legislature, because, as you said, the likelihood of having 2 coalition majorities in both chambers is pretty high right now. And so he's going to have to square off on that. Give me kind of a critique of his last 4 years and what you think he needs to change in the subsequent 4 years to try and fight this and to be able to hold the line, so to speak, on that government spend and be able to protect things like the permanent fund and the dividend and things like that. Give us your critique and what you think he needs to change.
Well, Michael J. Dunleavy has been at least as lucky as he's been good in the political arena. The Democrats have failed to put up really a viable candidate against him for 2 cycles now. Lesker, a nice guy, but, he's fixated on foster care and spending money on kids and stuff. Not a bad guy, but Mike Dunleavy kind of ran a rose garden campaign this time. And it reflects the fact that he got bludgeoned first go around when he listened to Tuckerman Babcock and disastrously proposed, a huge swath of cuts without communicating and without really targeting those cuts and communicating with the public as a policy level why they were essential. I would argue he tried to go too far, too fast without enough communication. That's always a problem if you're a cavalry soldier. He's learned, and what he'll do now, will he continue to listen as much as he spouts off? Will he actually get staff who know how to implement things? He's had 2 disastrous attorneys general, and he's on a new one who's, not particularly compelling in terms of running the legal side. I don't know what's going on over at Revenue, but, the big 3 departments, Revenue, Administration, and the Department of Law, where you really have an opportunity to see the money in, money out, because admin has a huge amount. You got to have good people in there that know what they're doing. His selection of staffing in many regards has been as bad as Frank Murkowski's, which was terrible, and as inadequate as Bill Walker's, which was lousy. We'll see if he can buck that up. He's finally got a Department of Natural Resources commissioner who seems to know what he's about and can get stuff done. The relationship with the legislature is going to be very dicey, and he's got to be equal parts firm hand and charming. And I don't know Michael Dunleavy well enough to see whether he's got the ability to both schmooze and kind of threaten people in a congenial way, And there's all kinds of techniques I've watched governors in the past use, but we'll see. One thing else about Dunleavy, he has a learning curve. He's not a flatline guy. But we'll see what he's really made of, because he's got 4 years to do really a reduction in government spending. And he's got to have, like, in real terms, with inflation, all he has to do is about 5% a year without inflating it. And you've got an effective 10% cut for 4 years. That's a 40% cut, but it's got to be driven by policy. And I don't know that he's up to that.
I think you hit the nail on the head specifically when you were talking about the communication. I think that's one thing this governor has failed at from day one is communicating not only with the legislature but with the public of what what he needs to do and what he's trying to do and the policy changes. Donna, your thoughts on this real quick here? We got about 2 minutes.
Yeah. So, to Joe's point about the reductions over time, the bigger picture is that the governor is leaving himself with the same type of deficit that he had when he inherited from Walker. So, there's really not an option other than to make reductions. And I don't disagree with Joe over time. The reason that we were such terrible, well, one of the main reasons, in my opinion, we were such terrible communicators is because we didn't attach the policy changes to the budget. And it's a lot easier to communicate to people when you're reforming things and improving them than, as we said before, just using the dreaded, cut word.
Right.
I will say that in our defense, the governor did have a few good appointments. In addition to myself, Bruce Tangeman at Department of Revenue, Kelly Shabaka at Administration, which, as Joe points out, those are our very, very important agencies. So I just kind of got chuckle, but I wanted to give a shout out to Bruce and Kelly. So they were terrific.
Yeah, no, and I agree, and I'd really like to know. Maybe we can get into this in the next segment. When we keep coming back to this thing of policy, I want to break that down for people so they understand when you say policy, what do we mean? And those policy changes and some for instances, and I think we'll dive into that here in just a second. So Donna, you and Joe hold the line. We're about to rejoin and do our thing. So let's get to it. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like and share this show. Hit subscribe, ring the bell. Let's do it. All right, we're continuing now with Joe Geldhoff and Donna Arduin. We're talking about the elections, the results, and what it means for us moving forward in the future. Donna Arduin, former OMB director, was talking with us here previously before the break about some of the changes in policies and things we could do. And she said, well, let's just emulate everything Florida's doing because that's working. There's no sense in reinventing the wheel. And so, Donna, as we continue to talk about this idea that policy should drive the budget and not the other way around, and using Florida as an example, so that people understand that we're just not talking about high-level cliched words like policy. What does that mean? Give us some for instances and some examples out of Florida that we could emulate here in the state of Alaska to help drive our policy and our budgets properly.
Yes, I'll talk about things other than education for a minute. You mentioned, or I think Joe mentioned, foster care during the break. And it's tough in all states. What we did in Florida was, instead of trying to drive the policy from the top down, we gave everyone, of course, we have counties, you don't have all incorporated boroughs, but just to tell you what we did in Florida, every one of them the opportunity to determine how to run their own system. And gave them a flat rate contract instead of telling them, for example, and everything's about incentives. By the way, every policy is about incentives. If you're incentivizing the wrong things, you're going to get the wrong things. You have to flip them upside down. So instead of incentivizing having kids in out-of-home care, which is what happens if you pay them by the amount of kids that are in out-of-home care,
right?
We gave every county a flat rate contract and said, you figure out how to do it. Miami-Dade had half of the out-of-home care population in the state of Florida. After I left Governor Bush to go to start my consulting firm, I joined the board of the not-for-profit that said, we're going to run, that Miami-Dade decided you're going to run the contract for foster care. For a flat rate over 7 years while I sat on the board, not asking for one more dime from the state, we cut this out-of-home care population in half. We spent the money, instead of on keeping kids in out-of-home care, because that's how you get paid, we spent the money on prevention and adoptions. So that's just one, it sounds simple, but it's a terrible, terrible thing for kids who are in that situation to face.
Right.
We got rid of the definition of, kids that weren't adoptable. So anyway, there's so much that can be done. Medicaid is sort of a more bureaucratic thing to talk about, other than in Florida, it's the smallest agency because it's contracted out. You do eligibility determination. You find out if people are actually supposed to be on. You limit the amount of services they have, and you make sure that they're audited. None of those things are happening in Alaska.
Right. Well, you mentioned something that I think is almost a dirty word in government, and that is incentivizing efficiency. I mean, I've talked about it for years that we should have some kind of incentivizing of the different agencies to perform and produce the best product possible for the least amount of money, and to incentivize them to do so with bonuses and other things. And people just look shocked at me like, well, we can't do that. These are government employees. Well, yeah, but if they are incentivized to do a better job and get a little bonus at the end because they delivered the same or better services for less money, that would make sense. I know other states have embraced that. Why can't we, Donna?
Can I give you one more example? Governor Dunleavy, when he was doing vetoes the first round, he said, if I veto this much out of Medicaid, is the agency going to be able to live with it? And I said, that depends on what they think they're supposed to be doing. What do they believe their outcomes that they're driving toward? I believe right now they think their outcomes are supposed to be serving as many people as possible, getting as many people on state health care and as possible. And I'm not criticizing them for that, but that's going to cost a lot of money. If their outcome was how to get people off of dependency, then you could spend a lot less money.
Joe, your thoughts here on this, specifically on the idea that, creating efficiencies is in part due to self-interest in some of these agencies in places like Florida and other things, by incentivizing these employees or by contracting it out, as Donna was just talking about, out to other private sector things with a flat rate. I mean, that's something we could do in Alaska. But again, I think it goes back to your point of them saying, oh, we're creating jobs. We couldn't do that. I mean, give me your thoughts on this.
Well, we in Alaska, and Donna has great experience up here. None of us should underestimate the difficulty in actually achieving successful reform, because for 40 some years, we talk about a budget, we talk about an economy up here, but Alaska, to a degree that is painful for someone like me, is basically become an allocative society. We spend all the time talking about the budget, and we give a little nod to policy, but mostly it's a divvy up the loot situation. And if there's a lot of loot, we divvy it up, and it's easier. And when things get tough, we don't know what to do, so we spend all of our savings. We have got to break that cycle, and that's a very difficult task, and it will take a clear-eyed leadership on the part of the executive branch to set incentives to do that. We could talk about examples and everything, but the public's frustrated, and they should be. The public knows in their heart of hearts and in their minds that we spend too much for insufficient outcomes. And I wish Michael J. Dunleavy the very best, but unless he develops policies that are reduce dependency, increase liberty, and then finds the people who will rigorously apply those policies to reduce the budget, we're going to roll along for another 4 years. And, eventually Alaska's going to be a poor state. I mean, I'm big on oil development if it pays its way. And I'll kind of go back to, here's the key test. And it was a Jay Hammond test. People roll their eyes about Jay Hammond, but he had a two-pronged test. Is it good for Alaska, and does it pay its way? Now, there's a lot of room to talk about that. But we never seem to get the second part of Jay Hammond's test. Does it pay its own way? That's right. A simple test. And it's one that most politicians, they forget about. Somebody walks in and says, oh, let's build a road to Ambler. Oh, that's good for Alaska. Well, is it? Does it pay its own way? No. But here we are spending millions of dollars on a road to Ambler through ADA.
Right.
And it's for a Canadian mining company. And, the mineral rate of return, Clem Tillian used to laugh about the rate of return on minerals.
Right. The severance. That's a whole show in and of itself. We're down to the last 3 minutes here, so we're going to start off with final thoughts. Joe, we'll actually start with you. You got about a minute and a half here. Give me your final thoughts on what we should be doing, what we should be watching in the coming months ahead.
Well, today, watch the election returns. They'll be announced. I think it's pretty clear on how the ranked choice voting is going to turn out, but there's likely to be coalitions in both the House and the Senate. It's going to come down to Michael Dunleavy hectoring, cajoling, strong-arming, glad-handing a way to keep the budget with a 5% decrease from this year's baseline. And then he needs to do that for 3 consecutive years to get some meaningful downward movement. And it should be policy-driven. But it's a new legislature, a lot of new people, and there'll be a lot of chaos. But the citizens of Alaska need to keep saying, we can't spend our way into prosperity. We can't borrow our way. We need to have targeted cuts. And what's wrong with having a PFD in the Constitution so we can take that issue off the table,
right,
and not have the annual food fight? Those are my thoughts, Michael. Nice to be on your show.
I think that there's a reason why they don't want to talk about the PFD, because they don't want to fix the problem, I think. But personally, Donna, your final thoughts here on the upcoming session and what we need to be focused on and everything else?
Yeah, great. I'll pick up where Joe left off on not spending your way to prosperity. You also can't tax your way to prosperity, and taxing and spending are the same things, but we didn't talk about it. The worst thing that Alaska could do is adopt a California-style income tax on the top 20%. I mean, when California did that, at least it was a prosperous state, but it's sinking fast. And you don't need to take my word for it. Just look around other states' experiences and say, that's something that we shouldn't do. And I definitely don't think you should do it. If people say, well, we can hope that our PFD will be larger. No, it won't. They'll spend it on government. Probably what they'll do is say it's for education, and then more money goes to the NEA and the bloated administration.
This has been I've been trying to do a self-review on this whole thing and basically decide, what do we need to do different? I mean, obviously this whole idea of standing in the middle of the road and putting our hands up and saying, stop the spending, is not working. So what do we do? I still don't have the answer. We've talked about taxes. We've talked about this. We've talked about that. I wish we had solid answers. I wish I could figure it out. But this is going to be an ongoing discussion, I'm sure. Joe Geldhoff and Donna Arduin, thank you so much, both of you, for being part of the program today. I wish you both a very happy Thanksgiving. Thank you for coming on board.
You as well.
Good to be here. Have a nice Thanksgiving, everybody.
All right, hold the line for just a second. Folks, we got more coming up, including Nick Begich, who's going to be joining us in hour 2. And we're going to see exactly what he has to say here in just a moment. It is the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Be kind, love one another, live well. We will see you on the other side. One final question here for Joe Geldhoff and Donna Arduin. I have been throwing the idea around here that what we need to be looking at is a broad-based flat tax, change our stance 100%, because I've been against any kind of taxes, but the only way that we seem to be able to get the people engaged is when they're actually feeling it in the pocketbook. And they've been so tax adverse in this state, basically saying we shouldn't have any taxes. The government can do anything it wants as long as it doesn't institute any taxes. And my thought is, well, what if we just reverse our course 180 degrees and say, fine, give us a broad-based flat tax that affects everybody equally, and then we can, and that will maybe give us a chance to change some of the things out. And but again, it's just me throwing ideas up against the wall. I know that there's people in the chat room immediately screaming about that, because there should be no new taxes. Donna, your thoughts on this quickly, and then I'll get Joe's before I let you go.
Well, I think I've been clear about my position on income taxes, and we could talk about them for hours, but there's tremendous amount of data that shows that it's always going to be a detriment to the economy. An income tax shouldn't be used to pay for the PFD. As I said, the earnings reserve fund pays for the PFD. An income tax would only grow government. You don't need to grow your government in Alaska.
And Joe, your thoughts on this as well?
Well, I'm a tax of all the things that need to be addressed as part of a fiscal plan, so to speak. Taxes should be the last thing on the agenda. And the first thing, in my view, is solve the PFD problem. I won't spin out a specific formula, but if you put the formula as a mandatory payment in the Constitution, it does two things. It takes the fight about where you come up with the money for the PFD off the table. It provides certainty. And secondly, it's a de facto spending cap, because when you allocate constitutionally a permanent fund dividend, it means less money for government. And that is in practice, going to require real scrutiny of what we're spending money on, and will probably limit it. If you do those two things, and then there's a consensus that you need taxes, maybe you should look at a flat tax, but it should be the last thing you look at, the last thing you address, not the first thing. And, the people who like big government, it's always the first thing. And I'm a modest government guy and maximize liberty and opportunity, and taxes don't do that. And I pay them. My business pays them. We pay income tax around here. We pay sales tax.
Right.
But don't feed the beast. We are already a bloated bureaucracy with excess government around here, and it goes against what Alaska is all about.
Michael?
Yeah. Donna, go ahead. Go ahead, Donna.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
The other
You were
thing is
gonna
this argument about skin in the game.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay,
I can hear you.
So that argument is flawed in Alaska, because it would only make sense if every man, woman, and child in Alaska was getting a $15,000 dividend every year. If all of the money from oil, as Milton Friedman said, give it to the people. When it started gushing, not some small portion, and then argue from there. If it all went to people, then you could say, okay, how are we going to structure our government? How are we going to pay for it? But to say, how are we going to spend more than we're spending now? That's economically insane.
Yeah. Well, I've advocated for that for many years. Give people all the money that comes in and then tax them. And of course, you'd see pitchforks and torches all the way down to Juneau if you did that, because then they would be like, wait, what are we spending it on? We are facing the largest stealth tax in the nation, both on the resources and then on top with the PFD tax as well. So, I agree. I'm just trying to figure out some way to change the narrative, to change the ideas, to wake people up. I don't know what it is. We're going to explore them all. Donna, thank you so much for taking time out. I know you had to stop your drive, and I apologize. I appreciate you coming on board. Joe, as you as well, thank you for coming out and joining us today.
Pleasure. Good show. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. I appreciate you as well. And I think Donna has popped off there. All right. Well, thank you so much for that. I see that Nick Begich is in the green room, hanging out with us, getting ready to jump on board. Let's test it with him to see where he's at this morning. Good morning, Nick. How are you doing this morning?
Doing well. How are you doing, Michael?
We're doing good. We're ready to dive into hour 2 here and get your hot take on it. So today's decision day, right? And we're all hoping for a Christmas miracle, but we know how that goes, unfortunately. So we're looking forward to talking with you, and hopefully you have some good news and some good ideas, and we can have a good discussion about this. As long as you're ready, we're going to dive into this.
All right, let's go.
Okay, we're going to put Nick Begich back in the green room for the moment, and we will continue. This is it. Okay, let me just check to see if there's any comments here that are worth the salt. They obviously fired Donna because she's much smarter than the gubernatorial team. This is true. I think that is true. I think that she obviously was getting the job done and making way too much sense. Hence the reason why they clipped her wings and fired her. I think that is it. I'm just going through some of the other comments here. See, most of it in agreement with what Donna and Joe were saying, and so this is it was a good discussion, and we'll try and have Donna back on here in the near future as we get closer. Maybe after the governor's budget comes out, she can come in and give us a little bit of a rundown. And by the way, that's only 20 days away. 20 days away, the governor's budget is going to have to come out. and we'll see what happens there. All right, Nick Begich is our guest. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We're going to kick things off. Here we go. Hour 2 is right now. Make sure you like and share, like and follow, ring the bell on YouTube, do all the YouTube-y things, and everything else. Let's get it going on. Here we go.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Yep, across the world on the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com. And, of course, that's where you'll find the audio-only live stream, links to our podcasts, and, of course, social media links to all the simulcast live streams as we broadcast the show not only on terrestrial radio, on your favorite radio station and or FM translator, but across the face of the internet on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Hour 2 of the big radio broadcast today. Happy pre-Turkey Day. This is where hopefully you guys have all got your turkeys in your sinks this morning, getting them all thawed out because, you don't want to wait till tonight and then find out that it's frozen in the morning. Ask me how I know. All right, I'm just saying. You need to go ahead and make sure that it's in a cool water bath this morning before you go to work. Do it. Don't forget. So Turkey Day coming up tomorrow. Great long weekend. We'll be gone until Monday, just FYI, again, and returning hopefully from a brand new, I'm redoing the studio over the weekend. So hopefully we'll have a bunch of new stuff here that we can play around with and have a good time with on Monday. But today, our final segment, our final hour of the program, we're going to be joined by Nick Begich, candidate for U.S. Congress, who joins us this morning for what we like to call an AAR, an after-action review, a debriefing. What happened at the election today, of course, at 4 p.m. They're going to run the tabulation, the ranked choice voting formula. They're going to turn the cameras on and push the button and watch the computer do all the work. And while we're hoping for a Christmas miracle, we know that the odds are that many of our candidates, including Nick and Kelly and some of these other ones, are on the precipice of getting cut to the curb and not making it. And so we want to get some insight into what they're thinking and where we go from here. So Nick Begich joins us this morning on the program, and let's pull him out of the green room and say good morning to him. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. Boy, it's been a long year plus of campaigning.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's an amazing process. Real privilege to do it when you have an opportunity to travel the state like I had and meet so many people from different walks of life, different areas, different industries. You gain a true perspective on the sort of long-term potential for the state and what we're really sitting on up here. And it's amazing. It really is truly amazing how much potential Alaska has, but we've got a lot of work to do. And one of the top of the list is to get the government out of the way and let people get to work.
Nick, let's talk a little bit here about the, as you said, you've been running for well over a year. You've been trying to take this. You're not the Johnny-come-lately who popped in after the death of Don Young. And so this has been a long and arduous battle. And now we've seen the results of how ranked choice voting is working and everything else. Give me your thoughts, your just kind of your initial gut reaction thoughts here from what's come out over the last few days as they continue to tabulate the votes. Tell me what your thoughts are in this and the ranked choice voting system as we see it.
Yeah, not really surprised. I mean, I think what we're seeing right now in terms of the vote totals kind of tracks with polling data that we'd seen internally and externally over the last few weeks. When you talk about ranked choice voting, I'm not one who was a supporter of ranked choice voting. In fact, I mentioned previously on your show a few weeks ago that I was actually on the board of the Alaska Policy Forum, and we were working against the ranked choice component of the ballot measure that was in place, educating people on how complicated this was going to be in practice. I think on the surface, it looks like it makes sense to a lot of people, but when you start to factor in things like ballot exhaustion, the number of candidates that can come in, the way it can be gamed by one side of the aisle or the other side, then you start to understand that there really are some problems with this system in practice. I think one of the things that we saw in my race in particular is, when Al Gross got out of the race, it allowed Mary Peltola to not really have to run her primary in many respects. Under this system of ranked choice voting, in other jurisdictions, they call it instant runoff. And you basically, in theory, would have two people left of center, two people right of center, and they run their primaries at the same time that they're running their general elections. But if one of those people drops out, like Al Gross dropped out in the special election, there's nobody left of center to
Right.
Mary Peltola that she's got to compete with. And so it creates an imbalance in that, your candidates on the right are trying to run a primary during the general election, and the other candidate on the left doesn't really have to do that. And so, I think when we look at this system, I think the voters, having seen it now a couple of times, hopefully we'll be able to put an initiative forward to remove this or modify it in some way that would be produce better outcomes for the people, outcomes that are more representative of their will and desire.
I think it's interesting that you talk about the ranked choice voting basically making the primary and the general happen at the same time, because I think one of my complaints, and I ranked you, you were at the top of my pick for the Republican ticket for sure. But one of the things that I was disappointed in was the fact that what we saw, in my opinion, during the general was the very stereotypical Republican response of trying to fight out a primary during a general. I think you're right. I think that the tactics were more primary tactics than general tactics. And what I mean by that is your campaign and the Palin campaign went after each other hammer and tong. And again, that's a primary tactic that needs to happen during the primary so that one candidate comes out victorious on that, and then they face off against the opposition. Instead, it took place during the general. Up until the last couple weeks, both of your campaigns were basically, and really, her campaign really never changed, but your campaign changed a little bit in the last couple 3 weeks. But you weren't really taking the Democratic candidate to task. You were going after each other, and I think that was a major mistake. In hindsight, looking back at that, would you do anything differently? Would you instead of attacking Palin, would you instead have focused all your energy on showing the differences between you and Mary Peltola?
Well, we did do that. I would say in the last couple of months, we were really focused on the contrast between my policy positions and Mary Peltola's policy positions. The challenge was it was really difficult there at the end to get a message through the noise, right? So we had a very expensive statewide Senate race. We had the governor's race, and we had our race. And in my race, we had Mary Peltola out there with, including IE money, maybe $7 million, $8 million, and that all of that noise sort of drowned out the message. So by the time our campaign had an opportunity to really highlight the contrast with Mary Peltola, it was difficult to create enough volume, if you will. So I think you're right, though. I mean, I think it really did boil down to, a battle on the right and not really a battle on the left, because again, there was no one on the left for Mary Peltola to battle.
Right.
And I think that just highlights again some of the imbalance that can be created under a ranked choice voting system as we have it. It can be gamed. I mean, we look forward to 2024 and start thinking about, okay, well, how does that potentially change? I can't see the Democrats running a compelling, strong candidate against Mary Peltola. So here again, I don't expect to see anyone on her left challenging her liberal policy positions.
Well, and so again, that comes back to the question of, I mean, should there have been a change of strategy in the very beginning? I mean, quite honestly, the tearing of candidates, especially amongst the same party members, should take place in a primary, and then it should. I mean, on the other side, once you hit that general window, that should be the focus, right? I mean, instead, the focus should be on the opposite side of the fence instead of eating our own. I mean, would
Well,
you?
I agree. I think what made this a little bit different was that we had 2 elections in one cycle. We had the special
Right.
election, then we had the regular election, and so we pivoted, went to in our regular general to Mary Peltola, and to your point, we didn't see the Palin campaign do that at all. They never took a shot at Mary Peltola, never attempted to contrast policies there. It was a lot of
Kumbaya.
yeah, exactly. A lot of kumbaya, and I don't think that helped our case on the conservative side of the aisle to draw the contrast. I think that Ms. Palin's campaign could have done more to highlight contrast, because there's a big difference between certainly what I believe and what Mary Peltola believes. And for
Yeah.
people who are really watching the campaign, they would have seen that.
Yeah. Well, and I think those of us that really, again, dug into it, we understood that. But unfortunately, it's not the super voters that you have to worry about. It's the middle of the road, kind of low information voters and people who are just kind of understanding what's going on, or people who take all their information off the advertising instead of doing any research on their own. And unfortunately, the perception is that you guys were just scratching the hell out of each other, and Mary was over in the corner stroking her chin, going, "Yes, yes, yes, please continue." And that's unfortunate. And we're going to have to get smarter about how we may not like ranked choice voting. I know that there's efforts underway to repeal it. Whether or not that actually happens, it's not going to happen in the next 2 years if it's a citizens initiative to repeal it. So it's going to take some time. So we're going to have to learn to play by the system, even though we don't like it. We're going to have to learn how to do it. It's the rules of the game. If you want to win the game, you're going to have to play by the rules. So we're going to have to change how we do things. You were talking about next cycles already, and the next election cycle. You're going to have to change the way you do things, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think for voters out there that are saying, "Hey, look, I don't like the system, so I'm only going to rank one person." That is so self-defeating, because unless you believe that the remaining candidates are equivalent to one another, you really have to rank as long as we have the system that we have. And again, I'm not a supporter of it, but while it's here, we have to use it. And ballot exhaustion is a real problem. That is a real problem. For those who aren't familiar with the term ballot exhaustion, that's when somebody does not rank more than one or maybe more than two candidates. When you stop ranking in the system, your ballot potentially will stop counting if your first place choice or maybe your second place choice doesn't make it into the final two folks. And so we've got to get smarter on that. It's just part of the process as we work through this. There are a number of other alternatives for tabulation under ranked choice voting. I've heard several different ideas advanced in terms of how to modify this, or how to repeal it, or how to sell a repeal to the public. I think there's so much conversation happening, at least on the right side of the aisle, around this. I know there's probably 3 or 4 different groups that are taking a look at putting forward measures to repeal or modify the system.
Yeah. I will give you kudos. You at least were not advocating for bullet voting, which I know is a big problem, especially early on in your in the Palin campaign, was that they were advocating for a simple one and done, which again, you may not like the system, but you got to work within it. And we've got to, we've got to really take the bull by the horns on that and do that. And so kudos to you for standing with the rank the red theorem from the very, very beginning. Nick Begich is our guest, candidate for U.S. Congress. We're going to talk with him here in just a second about, today's tabulation, what his thoughts are on that, and where he goes from here. We're going to continue in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. It is the Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We will continue our discussions with Nick Begich III right after this. Don't go anywhere. Back with more.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break right now. Commercials are running, and we're on with Nick Begich. I've seen several comments in the chat room here, especially after you talked about Al Gross dropping out and everything else. And so the question that a lot of people are asking, and I think it's a valid question, not that I agree with it, but I think it's a valid question. People are asking, when you saw Al Gross drop out, why didn't you consider dropping out at that point with Palin having recognition and everything else and all that? So I just want to give you a chance to respond to that.
Yeah, it's an important question, and it's a perfectly reasonable question too for people to ask. The challenge was we had access to data, and there was data available to the public from pollsters as well that showed that my getting out of the race was not going to change the outcome. If Sarah Palin were heads up with Mary Peltola, she would lose. We knew that going into the special general election. We knew that in the regular election. And I think when the results come out later today, you're going to see that Sarah Palin will lose by even more than she lost previously. And this is another challenge with ranked choice voting, is if you have a candidate that is a very appealing candidate to a subgroup, but that same candidate can't appeal to the center, they'll never get to 50% plus one vote necessary in order to win under ranked choice voting. So the reality was Sarah Palin was never going to be able to win this race. The data showed it. It's not my opinion, it's fact. And I think we're going to see that here later today to an even greater extent.
And so in your mind, should Palin have been the one to drop out in that case? I mean, looking at those numbers and looking at the hard facts and everything else, should she have been the bigger person and stood up and said, well, we got to find, numerically you're the candidate that can beat her? Should that have been the case?
It depends on what you think Sarah Palin's motives for being in the race in the first place are. If Sarah Palin's objective in the race was to ensure that a Republican were elected to our sole House seat, yes. If you believe that Sarah Palin was in this race for other reasons, then her behavior makes perfect sense. And I'm not quite sure any of us can crawl into the mind of Sarah Palin and try to figure out what she's thinking, how she thinks it. She's sort of an enigma in many respects. Hasn't really been a part of the Alaska political scene for 10 plus years, and popped out of the woodwork and decided to throw her hat in the ring. And nobody really knows why for sure. Right. But if she wanted to see a Republican in the seat, she should have gotten out of the way and allowed that to happen. I look at the data. I'm a data guy. I have a master's degree in information technology and decision sciences. This is, something that I understand. For Sarah, she was quoted on the campaign as saying polls are for strippers. So we got very different perspectives on the relevancy of data in this case.
Yeah. Nick Begich is our guest, candidate for Congress. there's a lot of contention out there. There's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of camps. And I know some people don't want to hear a word against Sarah Palin. And others, of course, question your efficacy as a conservative because, of course, your family name and everything else. But I definitely chose you over Palin for a variety of reasons. One, I believe that you're in it for the right reason, and I believe your conservative credentials. And for her, she just did not convince me that she was not in this for any other reason other than to raise the visibility of Sarah Palin in the eyes of people and in the eyes of the world. And that's, it's unfortunate, but I think that's a lot of people's take on the other side. So we'll see where it lays out today. I mean, we are essentially 5-6 hours, I guess 8 hours away from knowing exactly what's going to come down. We're going to find out here, though, when that happens at 4:00 this afternoon. Nick Begich is our guest, candidate for Congress. We're going to talk a little bit about the election and where it leaves us, and then what Nick's plan is moving forward from here. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Here we go. All right, welcome back to the program. We're continuing now with Nick Begich, candidate for Congress, and we're going to talk a little bit about what he is expecting to do today as he watches the numbers. Again, he was just talking about how he's a numbers guy in the degrees and decision sciences and some other things. And so today is the big day, and we're going to get his take on what I'm deeming the possibility of a Christmas miracle that maybe from behind. We'll see what he has to say about it right now. So Nick, I voted for you number 2, right? I mean, I'm a libertarian, so I voted for Chris Bly, the libertarian. So my vote's going to slide on over to you this afternoon. Are there enough, in your opinion, votes to make a difference? Could this thing be upended? Did your voters vote for rank the red and vote for Sarah second or third? I mean, what are you seeing here in today's count that's coming out at 4:00 this afternoon?
Yeah, that's an interesting breakdown. So when you look at the people that chose, there's kind of 2 camps, right? So I believe that I'll be eliminated first, okay, after Chris Bly, right? Write-ins, Chris Bly, then me, then Sarah, okay? And so I think what's going to happen is if you compare where my second place votes went from the special general election and to the regular general election. So the question is, what changed between those 2 elections? I think you'll see fewer of my voters bullet voting. So I think that rank the red message will make an impact. However, I do think that a lot of the people who put me first, and I talked to them, even though I'm out here saying rank the red, even though I've said, that I put Sarah Palin second on my ballot, both in the special election and the regular election, and have said and been consistent about it for months. I have a limited amount of influence over someone else's vote, right? I mean, I can't make someone go into the ballot box and vote a particular way. I can say how I'm going to vote. I can say how I recommend conservatives vote. But at the end of the day, it's the voters' decision. And so I don't think you're going to see Christmas miracle in this race. I think you're going to see Mary Peltola probably win by 8 points, 9 points, plus or minus 2. I think that's probably the most likely outcome when everything is done later this afternoon in this race.
We saw it in the primary, in the special primary. We saw that a lot of your voters, Nick Begich number 1 voters, actually ranked Peltola in the end. And the same thing happened from Palin's camp as well. There was a large chunk. Why do you think that happened? And do you think that it's going to be in that same kind of numerical values then that it is now, or has that changed?
I don't know about her, how many of my first place votes end up going over to Peltola relative to the previous. I mean, I think fewer people bullet vote, but I'm not sure that proportion changes, because I think people who in the prior election were saying, hey, I'll put Nick first, but I'm going to put Peltola second. I think a lot of those people are they're not with Palin under any circumstances. And I think this goes back to the point that I was making in the prior segment, which was, when you've got a polarizing candidate, that candidate, sure, they're going to get through the primary, but getting into that general, into that second place spot, and then moving into first is going to be really tough for polarizing candidates, like Sarah Palin under a ranked choice voting system. It's a problem. It's an issue with the system, but the reality is, and we knew it again in the data all the way back into the special election, there was no way that Sarah Palin was ever going to be able to appeal to enough people to win this race.
So how important do you think it is? I mentioned it earlier. You mentioned it, that there are cadres of folks out there who are looking to repeal ranked choice. We were hoping that there would be some kind of legislative fix for this, but obviously many of the new players in the legislature benefited from ranked choice voting.
Right.
So the likelihood of that happening is pretty much nil at this point. So how important do you think it is that over the next couple of years that we focus on repealing ranked choice voting?
Well, I think it is. I think it's very important. I also think, there's one tweak there's a few different kinds of tweaks you could make to ranked choice voting, but one in particular would likely have solved the issue that we've been talking about this morning. And that is, if you were to eliminate the jungle primary component so that you had closed primaries for each party, and you were able to remove that piece of it, what you would have then is one Democrat, one Republican, one Libertarian, one AIPer, right? And those folks would move forward. If you left ranked choice voting in place then, I suspect that conservatives, folks on the right side of the aisle, would benefit from that, because your AIP and Libertarian votes would end up going over to a Republican most of the time. And so you'd get a better, more representative outcome. But I think the biggest problem that we have is that we've got the potential to have multiple candidates from the same party in the general election, and I think that would be resolved by that particular adjustment.
One of my heartburns situations in this state has been with the Republican Party in general. I think that there's been a real lack of leadership from the party itself. They've allowed a lot of these things to go on, whether it's, candidates that they refuse to censure or things for years until it was absolutely out of control, and everything else. How much of the blame of the things that we're seeing, and I guess I hate to say blame, but how much of a component do you think it is? Do the Republican Party play into this in the state of Alaska? I mean, do we need to tighten up? Do we need to get stronger leadership? Do we need to take more of a stand in this?
Well, I think so. First of all, let me say that I think when a candidate is running for a statewide office like this, the last thing you want to do is run around blaming things or blaming people or blaming the process. And I want everyone here to understand, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to do that. I don't win. I take accountability for it. I'm not here to point fingers at everyone else. Okay. So this is, I think that's a terrible example to set for the public, and it's certainly not, who I strive to be. But regardless, there were some things, not from the state party in this case, but the national party, the NRCC and the RNC. So the NRCC is the Congressional Committee for Republicans. Their bylaws in both cases prevent them from getting involved in races where there's two Republicans, registered Republicans, running in a general election and no incumbent, which was exactly the House race.
Right.
And so they did very little. They only advertised a rank the red message in the primary, or rather the special election. In the regular election, they didn't do anything. They didn't support one candidate or another. They didn't run ads against Mary Peltola. They didn't do anything at all because their bylaws prevented them from doing it. And so I had many conversations with them. I know others in state leadership had many conversations with them, but at the end of the day, they they said, hey, our hands are tied. Well, my response to them was, look, you're going to see ranked choice voting across the country in other states, and now we're seeing it potentially down in Nevada, right? I said, you got to adjust your bylaws, because saying, hey, we can't participate in these races because we don't want to pick a side is not, it makes no sense. You're going to be losing races all over the country for no reason.
Well,
And
running ads against a Democrat. If there's two Republicans in the race, but your ad is running against the Democrat, I don't see how it benefits both of the Republican candidates at that point. If you're running ads pointing out the bad parts of the policies of the Democrat, but not naming, again, if the message was rank the red, Mary Peltola is bad for reasons A, B, and C, that doesn't affect either candidate. I mean, that makes sense.
That's exactly right. And that was my argument to them. I had many discussions with them about this, and, just they wouldn't move off of their position. So I think that's got to get fixed. I think that's something the national party needs to deal with. I know that the state party was having those same conversations with the national folks at the RNC and the NRCC, and they weren't able to get anywhere with them either. When you look at Alaska as the Alaska Republican Party relative to, say, the Texas Republican Party or the Florida Republican Party, I mean, those states, they have far greater resources than we have. And it's strange that the national party apparatus does not do more to support the Alaska Republican Party, because while our House seat counts just as much as any other House seat, our senators, right, we have a very powerful position in that, to elect a senator in the state of Texas is a very expensive proposition. To elect a senator in Alaska is far less expensive,
right,
in terms of the investment that comes in. And so
we're a cheap date, right? I mean,
that's it. And and it seems as though the Democrats have recognized that, the Republicans have not. When you look at some of the support that the Democrat Party has received, and I mean, look, you can go out, if you're watching or you're listening right now, go out to the FEC website, and you can literally look at the Alaska Democratic Party, and their donors are people like Sam Bankman-Fried, people like George Soros, and I'm not kidding you. He's literally listed on the Alaska Democrat Party's donor list this year.
Right.
Himself. I mean, the money that comes in to Alaska from outside to fund the Democrat apparatus is it far exceeds that of the Republican support.
We're talking with Nick Begich, candidate for Congress, and of course today is the day. Describe to me what you're going to be doing this afternoon, Nick?
Well, I'm going to be watching just like everybody else. I'm less I know the outcome of my race, probabilistically. But I'm more concerned about the state house and the state senate at this point. There's some races that I'll be watching really carefully. Tom McKay's race being one of them, where I'm very concerned about the potential for ballot exhaustion in some of those races. I think you could see some of the same effects in a couple of House and maybe one or two Senate races as well. That can change the balance of power in the state House and the state Senate, and it would come down to people not ranking. And I think that if we see that, it's going to be a real disappointment because we will have unnecessarily lost control in those bodies potentially. So,
do you think that this needs to be a twofold thing as we move forward? That not only do we need to attempt to repeal ranked choice voting, but in the meanwhile, we need to run an educational campaign to explain to people that if they want to win the game, they got to play by the rules that are set right now?
Absolutely. I think we've got to dual path it, because if we're not able to get ranked choice modified or repealed by 2024, we're going to be right back in the same boat, and folding our arms and saying we're not going to play is not going to produce any different outcome than what we're going to see this time. So we're going to have to make sure that everybody understands how this works, and that we're running the right candidates for the system. I mean, we got to think about that strategically. Who are we running? Are we running candidates that have the potential to appeal to 50% plus one of the voters or not? Because if you don't, that it doesn't matter what you do in terms of ranking, you're not going to end up with good outcomes. So I think candidate selection is going to be an important consideration moving into 2024 as well.
And we need to modify strategies so that we're not running primary strategies during the general election. I mean, I think that's huge. I mean, again, I'll be honest, Nick, that's the one disappointment in this whole thing is that I think that was one of the reasons why this whole thing fell apart was because we were running primary tactics in the general election.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, again, primaries being part of generals is a feature of ranked choice voting. This ranked choice voting system, the way this one is constructed, creates that effect. The difference is in our race, the Democrat didn't run a primary because she had no one on the left side of the aisle running against her. And I think if there's a takeaway from this race, it's that if you see that there is no one, that there's not at least two candidates left of center in a race, then you really can't afford to run a combative primary style general election on the right.
Yeah. Nick Begich is our guest. One final segment dead ahead. We're going to find out where we go from here. That's going to be the next segment. The Michael Duke Show continues. It is your home for common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Nick Begich III continues with us in just a moment.
Our light, our guide, and our trusted friend. Michael Duke Show.
All right, Nick Begich, our guest here on the program. I really think, Nick, and I know that there's a lot of commentary in the chat room here that there's people who are upset and everything else, and okay, that's fine. But I think we have to have an honest after-action review of what took place. We have to be honest. And I mean, I appreciate the fact that you said, you're responsible for your own failure. Great. I mean, we understand that. The question is, how do we improve? And I think if we don't have these hard conversations of what went wrong, we'll never fix, what happened moving forward. We've got to fix it. I think that one of the primary reasons, and this is from the very beginning, quite honestly, after the initial special primary, and I'm talking about before we got to the generals, I'm talking about to fill the seat in the temporary interim. I think that was the biggest mistake of all, was treating, moving forward after the primary, was treating it as if, again, we're still in the primary and the continual clawing. And I mean, Palin can be an easy target in a lot of ways, right? I mean, all you have to do is say quitter, and half the people in the state go, yeah, and they're upset about it. But I think that was, looking from the outside looking in, I think that was the biggest mistake your campaign made from the very beginning, because all you had to do, even before Gross got out, but all you had to do was focus on the differences between you and Mary, and say, I'm on the right and Mary's wrong on this. I'm on the right, Mary's wrong on this. I'm on the right, Mary's wrong on this. And you know what? Rank the red. And if you don't vote for me, vote for somebody else that's wearing the red shirt or whatever. I mean, I think that would have been better for more Alaskans in the long run. I think they would have resonated with that message. We've seen it in the state. People, they do not resonate in the state with the kind of the negative attack dog campaignings. I think Mitch McConnell did nothing more than piss a lot of people off. He could have burned the $7 billion and it wouldn't have mattered, because people get angry about that. What do you say?
Well, I don't agree. I don't agree. I think, but I will say this: when the fog is clear and you're able to look back like we're doing right now, it's a little bit easier to see what you might have done differently, because what you did didn't produce the outcome you were hoping for. But try being in the middle of the race, right? This is the first time we've ever seen ranked choice voting and an open primary system combined in the nation. And we did, we're doing this in an environment where we had 51, then down to 48 candidates in a race. And you're trying to say, okay, how do we break through the noise and get to the final four, and then have a policy discussion? And that was very difficult. I think it was very difficult for a lot of the candidates. I mean, you look at all the candidates that we went through to get there. And I think again, I think that the challenge that we had in our race was, I mean, look, if you want to go through the list of challenges, we can do it. We can say, look, Don died, right? Don died. 50 candidates in a race. Sarah Palin gets in with 30 minutes left to the filing deadline. Donald Trump endorses her, flies to Alaska, does a rally for her. First time we've ever seen anything like that in the state's history. Mary Peltola squeaks it out and then gets supported by Luke Skywalker, and in 48 hours raises $2 million, which is more money than Sarah Palin or I raised combined the entire campaign. I mean, you can go through the litany of all these structural issues that came into the campaign, and I don't think that there's anything that I could have done differently to produce a different outcome.
So you don't think that, I mean, again, I understand when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to see, but in hindsight, you can go back and look at it. So you're saying that if you had changed the tact from right out of the primary, I mean, you did the primary stuff that you needed to do, but once the general started, you did what I just talked about. You just primarily focused on Peltola and hammered on Peltola the whole time and put the message of rank the red out at the end. You don't think that there would have been any difference in the outcome?
I really don't. I don't think there would have been a difference in this particular race. Now, if Palin's not in this race, I think the race is completely different. The character of the race changes completely. People have talked to me since even before the special primary, right? And they've said, "What's the strategy on ranked choice voting?" And I've told them for over a year, it depends on who the final four people are. It's completely dependent on that.
Yeah.
You look at the Senate race, right? You had Elvie Gray Jackson got in, then she got out, right? And then they put Pat Chesbrough in, and Pat Chesbrough never had the funding, never was sufficiently up to speed on the issues to present a compelling case for the Democrats, and so those Democrat first place votes went over to Lisa Murkowski.
Right.
If you had a compelling, well-funded candidate on the left, I think Lisa Murkowski's in trouble in that race, a lot more trouble than she is right now, right? And and so it really depends on who's in the race. It kind of dictates strategy from there under ranked choice.
Right. We got to jump back in here. Nick Begich is our guest, The Michael Duke Show. All right, welcome back to the program. Nick Begich is our guest, candidate for Congress, and so the question becomes at this point, and I think, again, statistically and numerically, Nick doesn't have a chance of pulling it out here today. So that leads to the next question of, all right, Nick, you've thrown your hat into the ring on the big stage, so to speak, the big stage, and you didn't quite make it. So the question is, what does Nick Begich do now? Do you do you reset? Do you drop back? Do you go down to a lower level? Do you go to the state race? Do you do something locally, or are you going to stay engaged at this national level? And will we be seeing Nick Begich in the future?
I think you're going to see me in the future. The question's always when, for what, and that's something that I'm working through with my team right now, watching sort of the structural, I'll call it the macro political environment for 2024 as it sets up. You've got Trump, who's just declared. We're going to see what happens with him. You've got DeSantis, who, I really like. I think he's got a lot of potential, but he has not declared for the presidency yet. I think that's going to dictate a lot of what happens, not just in Alaska, but across the nation in primaries and general elections, because I think you're going to have potentially Trump candidates and DeSantis candidates, right? And how that kind of shakes out will dictate a lot of factors. We talked briefly in the last segment about some of the large structural factors that dictated a lot, in my view, a lot of the outcomes of what happened in my race and sort of probably the Senate race as well in Alaska. And so you got to take those things into account. How much money does Mary Peltola have on hand, right, is an important question.
Right.
but it's been my contention for a long time that the real value that's created in society is not created through government. It's created through private industry. That's where I've spent my career, on the private side, and I've been successful. I do well there. I'll continue to create value there. And so, I think there are a lot of ways that you can add value. I think for the people of Alaska, though, the biggest obstacle that we have to creating value in the private sector is a government that's gotten too big and gotten in the way of our ability to create value from the resources we have in the state. And so, if there are things that I can do that will help alleviate that's not in the Congress, then I'll look for those opportunities as well. So we'll see where I go over the next couple of years, but I am definitely still evaluating this, and I think that that the vision for Alaska remains the same. We've got to take this state to a place over the next 20 and 30 years where we know that we're going to have an important role in our nation's resource future. And the resources of Alaska haven't gone anywhere. They're still on the ground. They're still waiting to be accessed. And that's not going to change tomorrow. It's not going to change 100 years from now unless we get the right leadership in place, again, to get government out of the way and allow us to develop what we've got.
In the short term here, let's say the next 2 or 3 years, what do you see being the biggest challenges that this election, what are the consequences of this election on the state and on the nation, since we're talking about the national stage? What are the consequences, and what are you going to be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I think, for Alaska, it's a missed opportunity in the House, because now we see that we're going to be in the minority, represented by Mary Peltola in the House minority. So we don't really have much of a voice there at the moment because of that. I think that at the state level, when you look at the state Senate and the state House composition, that is concerning. But we still have a governor with veto power and the ability to push back against maybe a center left on balance House and Senate, right? And so if the governor is ready to use that veto pen, I think we'll still have a check on what could end up being a less than conservative House and Senate composition. We'll see here later today how that shakes out. But I don't think that things are hopeless, but I do think if you're someone who's in the center right, we've got to get activated and mobilized and prepared for 2024. Don't assume that we're going to be able to get rid of ranked choice voting before then. I think, we're all hopeful that we can, but to hang our hopes on the future of Alaska on whether or not we can get rid of ranked choice voting, I think is naive and wishful in its approach. I think we've got to deal with reality the way that it is, and prepare, look ahead for the next few years and prepare for those elections. Find good candidates, make sure we're funding those candidates, make sure those candidates have policy positions that resonate with not just the right side of the aisle, but people in the center. That's important. And if we can do that, we'll win back some of these seats, and we'll be in a far better position as a state going forward, in my view.
Well, that's been my argument for a long time. There are more independents in this state than there are Republicans and Democrats combined. We should be reaching into the middle. And even though maybe it doesn't align with our principles or policies, we should at least reach out to them and explain what's going on, and at least have that conversation, because that's the important part. That's the electorate that we need to focus on. Any big issues in the national scene that you are not depressed about, but are are worried about for the next 2 years that are important?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest issue we've got to wrestle with right now is our national debt, national spending. I think that is really starting to become a significant threat to the American way of life and our standard of living. And I think it's naive to believe that we can continue to print money and spend money as though there's no consequence to that. There is a consequence. It usually shows up rapidly once it starts to materialize, and You can see it in other nations. We've talked about it on the show before. You can see it in Venezuela and Zimbabwe. You can see it even today in Japan, where the yen has lost somewhere close to I think a third of its value relative to the dollar in the last year, right? And why did that happen? It happened because the Japanese government has continued a course of deficit spending and heavy Federal Reserve Bank intervention, central bank intervention for the Bank of Japan. And we're following down that path right now. The Congressional Budget Office is showing that that our debt path is unsustainable. And as interest rates rise, we continue to refinance that debt, right? That U.S. debt is not financed under one fixed rate forever. It fluctuates based on the prevailing interest rates that are, interestingly enough, set by the Fed. And so what we're going to see is that as a percentage of total tax revenue, a larger and larger percentage of our taxes are going to go to servicing debt, meaning we're just paying interest on that debt instead of getting, arguably valuable or invaluable goods and services from the government, right? And so what does that mean? Well, it means that you're either going to get less or you're going to be taxed more. And neither one of those things are good. And so that's the biggest concern that I have, is getting government back in its lane, getting government spending back under control, and bringing those interest rates down. I mean, the interest rates are they don't just impact government, they impact individual consumers as well. And you're seeing credit card debt and mortgage debt and auto loan debt at levels we haven't seen in 20 years. They're rising super fast.
Right.
Because people are burning down their savings, they're accessing the debt markets, and that has a limit. And then when that limit hits, we're going to hit a hard recession. I believe we're in a recession now, but we'll be in a recession the style of which even the government can't ignore, and that's a problem. That's what concerns me.
Down to the less than 2 minutes here, Nick. Final thoughts for the voters and for people out there. What should they be watching? What should they be doing? Your exhortation to them. Go.
2024 starts today. If you don't like the results that you see at 4:00 today, don't throw your hands up. Put your hands down and get involved, right? Figure out a way to get engaged. I know there's a lot of folks out there that maybe you're a libertarian, maybe you're a Republican, maybe you're an independent who's just disillusioned and tired of party politics. But the reality is that candidates almost always run under the Republican banner or the Libertarian banner or any of these other banners. You know where you align most. Get involved. Try to find candidates that are going to be good. Try to fund candidates that are going to do well. You can't sit back and complain. It's amazing. I hear people on the trail. I say, well, I'm upset with this or that. Have you ever donated to a candidate? Never.
Right.
Have you ever gotten involved in a campaign? No. Well, it's amazing how much time people will spend complaining and how little time they'll spend getting involved with their time or their dollars. And so if you're upset, put your money where your mouth is and get involved.
Nick Begich III, thank you so much, my friend, for coming on board and talking with us today. It was an interesting conversation. We appreciate it. Folks, we are out of time for today. We will see you next Monday. Hope you have a happy Thanksgiving. And remember, be kind, love one another, and live well. We'll see you tomorrow, or see you Monday. Nick, I'll give you one final bite at the apple. Couple minutes here, whatever you need. Because again, I think it's a message that we have to start thinking more long-term. We have to start thinking big picture. We have to start thinking that we have to work within the framework we're given, whether we like the framework or not. So your final thought.
My final. Look, I don't want to close on a negative note going into Thanksgiving. I think we got a lot to be thankful for as Alaskans and as Americans. And, we have to put things in perspective. I've traveled all over the world. I've been to a lot of countries, probably 35 countries in my life. And I've seen some places, boy, you get off the plane, you go outside, you see how people live, and you're instantly thankful for what you've got as an American. And we have an abundance in this country. We have abundance in this country. And I want to keep it. I want to keep it, right? And I want to extend that kind of abundance to as many people as possible, right? And I think that is one of the main differences between sort of the way the left thinks about the world and the right thinks about the world. The left kind of tends to think that everything's a fixed pie, and if you have it, I don't. Well, I believe that, when we engage with people, when we engage with the free market, when we create value in meaningful ways, we can all succeed and we can all participate in that success. And so, I think there's a prosperity that we enjoy as Americans that we should be thankful for. Thank God that we've got it, and thank God that we have the opportunity in this country to go from nothing to something amazing just by putting forward the effort.
Right.
And we can do that. Everyone in this country has the potential to achieve greatness if that's their true intent.
Nick Begich, have a happy Thanksgiving, and thank you for reminding us that we need to be thankful for what we have. I mean, you got a 1 in 17 chance, or maybe now it's 18 chance of being born in the United States and being able to benefit from what our forefathers have done and everything else. And so it's a good opportunity, and it is a good time to be thankful. So I appreciate that. Thank you for sounding off, and I hope you and yours have a very happy Thanksgiving. And maybe we'll regroup later in December and talk with you a little bit about where we're going from here.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Michael. Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
Thank you so much, Nick Begich, our guest here on the Michael Dukes Show. All right, folks, that sums it up. That's it for today. That's it for the weekend. See, now I'm going to start tearing stuff apart. The second I turn everything off here, we're going to start ripping the studio out, and hopefully by Monday, we'll have all the new good stuff in here. You're gonna love it. I mean, you may not even notice a difference, but I will. So I appreciate you guys coming on board. Thank you for being part of my world here during the program. And thank you for participating. All right, folks, 4 p.m. today, ktoo.org. You can watch the results, and you can see how it all works out. The Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Happy Turkey Day. We will see you on Monday.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.